Hello and welcome to the Disable the Label podcast. I'm your host, Kerry, and on our podcast we'll be chatting about all things disability. Holidays, equipment, therapy, funding, you name it, and we'll talk about it. We want to empower and support parents of disabled children across the UK whilst they navigate their child's life. So, what are we waiting for? Let's get into it. This podcast is sponsored by Tree of Hope. Tree of Hope are a children's charity that help children and young people with disabilities or illnesses by supporting their families to raise the funds that they need to pay for specialist care that is not freely available through the NHS. Find them on our app now, just search Disable the Label and you'll find us. On today's podcast, we have Mike Poole from Walk This Way Global. He's come to chat everything about SDR therapy and therapy for disabled kids. So, let's get into it. Right, hello and welcome to the podcast. Today we have Mike. Mike, welcome.
Thank you. It's funny. I've just always been known as Mike. For the last 13 years I've been doing this, it's always been like, go speak to Mike. How are you today? It's good to see you. Haven't seen you in ages.
I know, yeah, it's been a long time. So Mike and I have known each other for, I can't even remember how long now, years.
10 or 12 years or something now, eh?
Yeah, I think it must be at least 10, I think now, yeah. So yeah, I met Mike
Joe
through...
You came in with Joe when we were working out.
Yeah, I met Mike through an ex-client. Well, she's still not really an ex-client because she listens to all the podcasts and she talks to me nearly every day. So, and I went and saw Mike doing what he does best with one of my clients, and we worked as like a cohesive team to make sure that she improved, basically. So, Mike, introduce yourself so everyone knows who you are.
Sure. So I'm Mike. I have a company called Walk This Way. I've been doing therapy on kids now for must be about 13 years. Before that, it was strength and conditioning of athletes, sports science-based training, and injury rehab. And we still do it. It's a really good thing that we still do on the kids. We use our knowledge from injury rehab on the kids, and that's it. But I think it's been 13 years or so now. I've been working 90% of the time with SDR or neurological conditions, and it's probably the most rewarding job I've ever done. It's amazing, and you get to meet cool people like yourself that are traveling around in vans and living in far out places like Morocco.
Yeah, well, so, yeah. You travel too. Which is quite cool. As he says, you've travelled, Well, I do.
America, actually, I'm off to Australia
Malta.
On Friday.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. Australia on Friday, and then.
So, how and why did you go from being a strength and conditioning coach to working with kids with disabilities?
Complete mistake. And it wasn't a mistake doing the job. I loved it, and I still do, but it was a complete, from left field. I was quite happy. I was working for Dundee United as a strength and conditioning coach for Dundee United Football Club, and absolutely adored it. I was working with pro athletes. I was a semi-pro athlete myself, and I sort of retired from playing much sport. And then just from nowhere, a guy that I used to work the doors with asked me if I would work with his child that has CP, and long story short, I kept turning it down, went and watched a physio session, and then I was asked if I would do it again, said no. I was asked if I would speak to St. Louis Children's and tell them what I saw and the problems that I saw from a strength and conditioning coach, because they're needing someone that can focus on S&C. And again, a long story short, arguably Deanna kind of convinced me to do it. Deanna Walters at St. Louis Children's. She said that they would help me, guide me, teach me whatever I needed to know, answer any questions that I had. So arguably, I fell into it like I have in most things in my life, just fell into the right path. And thanks to St. Louis Children's Hospital, I'm here today. So it was one of those lovely mistakes, but it wasn't something I went after. I didn't sit there and plan to be a physio because I didn't go to school to be a physio. I didn't want to be a conductor. I didn't have any interest in being conductor ed. It wasn't what I did. I liked strength and conditioning. I liked sports. I liked athletes. I liked athlete conditioning. I liked athlete training. I liked teaching. I liked coaching. And that's arguably what I am. Is I'm a coach. And I was a sports coach for many, many years and loved it. And it turns out that that's actually what these kids need sometimes is more pushing and strength and conditioning and less hugging and nurturing. So that's what we tend to do. We push them to be the best version of themselves. You know, we've had this conversation many times.
Totally.
It's about finding the ability that they've got and not working to the ability they currently have. What could they be? What could they do? What can they do with time? And that's kind of how I fell into it. I realized pretty early on that there has to be we spoke about this again, a beginning, a middle, and an end. So we have to have goals and we have to have progression. Otherwise, you're just training for the sake of it, and then everybody gets bored. There has to be a natural progression, and that's what we do. We look for what you could do, and we work out how to get there, and we put a timestamp on it, so we have an idea of where we're going, and then we constantly reevaluate and readjust, which is always difficult because you can never guarantee you're going to hit those milestones, but you've got to be smart enough to kind of constantly keep adapting and evaluating your sessions. One of the kids I work with, she's starting to walk. She's lovely. Such a lovely kid, Amelia Rose. She's just epic. She works so hard every single session. But we work with her weekly, and there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. Every 3 months I reevaluate and we start again. Because where she was 3 months ago to where she is now is completely different. So we go through the same evaluation process. We look at her and see what she can do, see what she can't do, where she's improved, what she's dropped down on, and then work out the next 3 months. And I think that's really important, actually. So really, St. Louis Children's Hospital taught me, guided me, helped me, and then I used my existing knowledge to kind of move into the next sort of stage. It was very bizarre.
So,
how did you get into it? Actually, that's a good question. How did you get into it?
Nobody's asked me that. So I've been around disabled kids all my life. My dad used to do something called Dream Flight, where he used to take kids to Orlando, Florida, to Disneyland for 10 days. So, and one of my dad's godson has cerebral palsy. He actually went to Hungary to have conductive education when he was younger. I didn't know about it until I was around, must have been like 20, 21. And I had got into studying disabilities, but kind of like was more advanced than my university degree and was like answering all the questions. Didn't need to go to the lectures because I just knew what I knew, and I'd done a lot of research and I'd worked with a lot of kids privately one-to-one, and I'd seen like the issues within disability, I suppose. And I was working with a girl just one-to-one as a carer, and I was like, always said, no, you can walk to the toilet, you don't need to like go in your chair every single time, you can walk. Like, she had cerebral palsy, and she had athetoid cerebral palsy, and she was more than capable to walk to the toilet. She could get herself upstairs, like. And I worked with her for a little while, and she kept saying, oh, you're really like a conductor. And I was like, I don't know what you're on about, like, whatever. And I remember I took her to Wales on holiday with her family, and I was like, right, we're going to do coast steering, we're going to do kayaking, we're going to do this. Like, I had like a whole list, and her parents were like, all right, like, they trusted me 100%. She was also deaf, so some of the time I had to take her sister with me, like, for example, kayaking. She would sit in the front, her sister would be in the other kayak so she could sign to her, because if I was behind I couldn't sign. And she was like, you really need to look into conductive education. And I was like, okay, yeah, I will. So I did, and I realised I was kind of already halfway there. Like, my thinking behind, especially like any of the kids I worked with, I didn't see them as this personal child that couldn't do anything. I saw them as, doesn't matter how how it looks or how you get there, but you can do anything you want to, and I will help you do that. And that's the kind of attitude I've always had, and
Yeah.
I think I probably
You
got
saw
that.
the ability first and disability second, right?
Yeah, totally. And I just kind of, when I went and had a look at conduct education, I liked it. It brought in my musical side, so I'm extremely musical, and I used to be a professional musician when I was younger, and so I'd
Oh
miss
wow, that's
doing,
cool.
yeah, I miss doing the music side. I always wanted to be a musical therapist, and that's why I'd gone to study disability studies so that I could then do a master's in musical therapy, because that's the kind of, you either do music and then do musical therapy masters, or you do something that's connected to musical therapy.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I
Did
just
you
went
play an
and
instrument or sing, or was it a bit of both?
I play the piano and the flute. My main instrument's the piano. Still play now. Yes, I have one in the van. And
Very cool.
yeah, I used to love doing that. So that's the way I got into conductor education. I saw it and I thought, this is amazing, and kind of just went and trained in it. And it was great for me because, like, I'm dyslexic as well, and I struggle academically, but I could prove myself, like, in a physical aspect or in like a practical aspect. Anything I can relate to, like, in a physical aspect is great. So I remember doing like my first ever exam, and they would ask me, like, what are the different types of cerebral palsy, and blah blah blah, and I obviously related everything to a child that I had known or whatever, so I could remember all of that. And then it was like asking me about MS, and I hadn't really worked with anybody with MS, so I just couldn't get the answers out, and I remember that vividly. And obviously then I went on to work with more MS and stroke patients, but yeah, so that's how I got into being a conductor.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because you mentioned about dyslexia and piano and learning an instrument, right? But the interesting thing about dyslexia is the answer to learn to read or do maths is to learn a different way of doing it and do more of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you want to learn to read better, you read more books and you figure out how to read. You want to be better at piano, you practice more, right?
Yeah.
The answer to walking with CP is to do more walking, to do more movement, but we stop thinking about it from that point of view because we
Mm-hmm.
sit there and we say, well, we don't. They're not walking perfectly, they're not walking correctly, therefore we shouldn't be walking, because fine motor skill and perfecting of walking is going to be much better for you than walking badly. And the
Mm-hmm.
interesting thing with that is you do your grade one, and you get to grade 10, right? You get to grade 10 by learning grade one lessons, grade two, grade three, all the way through, right? Walking, movement, reading, writing, they're all the same. At no point in your life do you start, today I'm going to play the piano, and you start at grade 10 being the best. You
No.
take the lessons, right?
Yeah,
But
totally.
we don't look at that with CP, and we don't look at that at all with the movement.
And also, like, I think the key thing is everybody learns differently.
And that's the
So
problem.
yeah, everybody learns differently, and we have to notice the way that somebody learns, like, as well. Because for me, I may be a musician. Yes, I can read music very well, but if you put a piece of music in front of me, I couldn't play it to you, because for me, I do everything by ear. If you played me a piece of music, I could then go and play it. And so nobody in my musical career until I was probably 17 or 18 knew that I was dyslexic. Everybody was just like completely oblivious to it, because they would play me the song and I would just play it back to them, and then I'd improve it from there. So and I feel like that is something that I've put into all the kids. I don't Whenever I've worked with any kids, I don't necessarily treat them all in the same or teach them all in the same way, because each one of them are so completely different, and I
Agreed.
know that they have the ability to do it. It's just I need to find what it is that gets them to know how to do it. And I think you're right, like, if we're not walking with them, then how are they going to learn? Because it's a little bit like, for example, I sign, obviously, like I said before, I haven't signed in years. I can remember the basics, but I cannot sign like I used to sign, like, quite fluently, because I'm not using it. So then I lose it. And it's the exact same with anything physical. If you're not doing it, you're not going to be able to do it in the future.
100%. I race motorbikes as a hobby. I love being on the track and doing crazy stuff. But my first track day of the year is not my best track day of the year. Um, it's the one that I'm wondering if I'm going to make that corner or not, if I'm going to accelerate too hard, and if I'm going to brake right, if I'm going to do it correctly. I'm sitting there and I'm not riding at my best ability. And then you take a deep breath and you go, I can do this. And you start to ease into it, right? That's the same for everything that comes. And we've got to remember that there's lessons to learn from everything. And unfortunately, what I find is in our jobs is that we almost over expect them to walk perfectly or move perfectly from day one, session one, hour one. We forget that actually they need to walk badly and then learn from that and move better and better and better. It's driving a car. You don't jump in your car and sit your test on the first day of your test. You learn how to steer, how to use the accelerator, the clutch, the brake, the feel, the tactility of it, the sensory, the bio input, the biofeedback. How much is too much? What's enough? How does it accelerate? How does it feel when it brakes? What's too much? How does the brake feel? They've got to learn that when they walk as well, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Or whatever, crawling, rolling, in a wheelchair, using sticks. It's irrelevant. They've got to learn the basis of it and do it really badly and allow them to do it badly to build up the confidence to do it well. But we almost turn around and say, we don't, but we almost turn around and say, you can't do it perfectly, therefore stop doing it. Where actually we've got to let them do it badly. And it's not a case you're building up a bad pattern. It's a case that you'll constantly adjust that pattern and constantly make it better. But you're allowing them freedom and the feeling of freedom and reduction of fear. Because they get so scared of walking. They get so scared. I mean, first time you come up to a roundabout in your car, you're like, oh my gosh, what is going on? Right? Because there's all these cars going in every direction. There's all these things coming out. You're like, oh my Lord, what's happening here? And then once you get used to it, you just start sliding in. You don't even think about it. But we don't allow the kids to get to that. But that's really important because they've got to learn that actually doing it wrong is part of the process. Learn from that mistake. Okay, so you took a little tumble there. Are you okay? Yeah, okay. So it wasn't that bad, right? That little fall. They're so scared of falling, but most of the kids have never fallen before.
Yeah.
You're like, how do you know what it feels like?
And
you're like, well, you don't like the sensation of falling.
Who does? Who does?
It's true though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's scary.
But I think it starts from that beginning.
Teach them to fall. Teach them to roll.
Yeah, and that beginning start. I mean, I know when I'm meeting kids that are like 1 to 2, that kind of age bracket, sometimes they've never been sat without anything behind them. Because what do you do as a baby with a baby? You prop them up, you put something behind them, you put pillows behind them, and then when you learn that they've got a neurological condition, you continue to do that even more, and you're trying to protect them, or then you put them in a pushchair, which then changes into a wheelchair, and then they have a supported seating at home, and then they have something to sit in. They have never had nothing behind them. So how are they going to learn how to sit if they are not ever given that opportunity and learn how to save themselves when they're sitting and falling backwards, or save themselves when they're standing, or save themselves when they're walking? Right. Like it all links. Everything is the same. Like if we don't teach that, then they're not going to know how to do that. And I remember working with one child and teaching her how to walk, and she was around 8, and a few years later a physiotherapist who was doing something for her, court case for her, came and called me and were like, I just want to say you've worked miracles. And I just said, no, I haven't. Her parents allowed me to teach her how to fall. She learnt how to fall, and then every time she fell, I was like, right, get back up again. What did you do different? Let's do something differently. What did you do wrong that made you fall? I taught her, I showed her. It might be that we need to show them in different ways. It might be need to ask them, how did that feel? Or, take a video of them doing it so they can see what it looks like, and then show them yourself to show them what it's meant to look like, or whatever. And explain things in the way that they're going to understand, and I think that's where I differ and became a different conductor, because I learnt from people around me. I learnt from you. I learnt from a lot of other people around me, and I learnt from the children themselves. So, I was using terms or phrases that I would learn in conduct.
That's the biggest one, though.
Yeah, and I learned to change the way that I was saying things, because we in conductive education we say things like, I put my right foot flat. What does that mean? What does that mean? Like, is a child gonna understand that? No. Like, and I would say, like, I would change things. And for example, when walking, I'd say, like, lift your knees up, because they were, when I said lift their foot up, they would lift it forwards rather than lifting their knee up, And I would change different things. And I think you're the same. You're learning continuously. And if you're open to that learning, you become so much of a better rehab therapist, strength and conditioning coach, whatever it may be that you are. But letting those kids teach you as well as teaching them at the same time.
You've got to remember they're very literal as well, kids. The abstract part of the brain hasn't fully developed yet, so they become very literal. So when a child sees something, they believe it's the actual truth, right? So you say to a child, pick up your foot, and then they pick up their foot, and you're like, that's not actually what I meant. What I meant was pick up your knee. And you're like, it's your knee I want you to pick up so you can step over something. So I use a term on the kids, and I like small step and balance, because a lot of them learn to walk and take this ginormous step, because a lot of the time they're being told to kick their foot in front of them. And actually, I don't want their heel to go past midfoot, so I want them to kind of go to there. Mm-hmm. So we can almost keep in that A gate, so they're keeping everything really close. Because if we're straight like this, and if we're like that, it's the same basic movement, right? So I know it sounds ridiculous, but all we're really doing is that. And by taking the foot to there, if we turn the angle, they're still straight. If that makes sense, It's easier to show you when you're doing it.
Yeah.
So we take a small step. So I call the right leg small, and I call the left leg step, and then we use balance. And balance is just stop and stand still. So I say, okay, so small, take a step. And the only reason I use it is because the words almost become synonymous with a movement. So the whole thing binds together, right? So small becomes the right, step becomes the left. Because trying to say to a kid, take a small step with your right foot, there's far too many words. Far too many. They're already confused because they're scared.
Yeah, 100%. They're only going to hear like the last word.
3-4 words max. Ideally 3. 100%. And then it's usually followed up with, I'm going to fall because I'm scared, because they've engaged the step reflex, which engages a startle or a fright reflex, and then they can't take the step anyway because they've gone into that period of where they've gone forwards. They try and protect it with their head, their hand, their body, everything comes back, and they fight it. So too many words.
Yeah.
So small step, balance, the walk, boom, bosh, boom. And then if you do that with them, they start to enjoy it. And stupid things, like I've got Amelia Rose, for instance, I get her to take a step, and she'd be picking her foot up, and I was like, okay, put it forwards. She'd bring the foot forward, but she'd never shift her weight onto it. And I'd be like, lean on that leg. And it got to the point where she'd lean, but she would be nervous of leaning. So it got to a point where I says, okay, so we'll practice leg pressing. So we did an awful lot of leg pressing. I would use the same word. I'd be like, push, 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 push. And then I'd get her to clap and say the word push. And as she claps, engages a little bit of overflow tone, makes her extend, got her into that position, and then she was fine. So then I used the same word when we step. So we take a step and then teach her to push. And she got used to that word meant this. So then she transferred her weight forwards. But she didn't have to think about it. It was just a continual progression of that same vocabulary and the same movement pattern just being progressed. Now, it's changed her walking. And now she's starting to walk independently. She's doing it on her own. She can, 10, 15 steps, sometimes 20, sometimes 3, sometimes 1. Depends on how she is on that day. But if her brain's really on it and you can link it all in, she can walk 20 steps and turn. Yeah. And it's just stupid things like that. When even turning, we teach the kids to turn, and we say, well, take this foot in front of that one and then turn round and pivot. I just teach the kids to walk forwards and look over their right shoulder all the time. And their body turns because it follows where your head is. That transverse movement. And you're like, we're making things so difficult for the kids because we expect so much of them. Maybe we just need to make it simple and easy for them because it's already hard.
Yeah.
They do have to work hard. They do. And it's a shame. But there's also things that we can do to make it a little bit easier for them. And that's not to use too many big words or too many words that sort of frighten them a little bit. So try and dumb it down a little bit. So it's a little bit simpler, a little bit easier, a little bit less scary for them. So we just take the zone out. And you guys do it
Yeah, oh
too.
yeah.
I've seen you, you
Yeah, totally.
bring the level down. If you can't do this, then bring it down to here. Scale it
And you have
backwards.
to,
That's what it's all
yeah,
about.
you have to like,
It's an interesting one, of
you
course.
have to see whether, like you said, you have to see where the child is on that day, because as we all know, you're different every single day of your life, and you have to work with how they are on that day, etc. But also, I think what's really key in all of this is we're linking the word to the action that they're doing, and that's what I find has been some of the most key things in the work. Obviously, that's a massive part of conductive education. It's not the only thing, but that was something that I took like straight away and kind of ran with, because I could see that every time that a child was like either saying it themselves or I was having to say it because they were like really, focused on what they were doing, then it worked. Or literally it was like, oh, light bulb moment. And it's like, yeah, because your brain is aware of what you're doing, because it's hearing what you're doing, and you're reminding it as you're doing it, and then you're going to link it to it, and then eventually you won't have to say that word, because your brain will know what it's doing. You're making new neural pathways so that your brain knows what it's doing, and that's the kind of work as well
100%.
as you can't just have that. It has to be like the strength, as we all both know, the strength side comes as a massive part of it, because without that strength you're not going to be able to do that. But I've seen some therapists just not.
It's interesting though, strength, right? Because one of the things I get told a lot,
It's all right.
sorry, you're right on the strength part, right? Just jumping onto that really quickly. But what is strength, right? Is it making the muscle bigger? Is it making the muscle stronger? Or is it making the connections better? Or is it a combination? Because if we look at a leg extension, do we do that when we walk? Of course we do. Once we've picked up our leg and we want to move it forwards, we extend. We use the rec fem and the other quad muscles to extend the leg forwards, right? And then we shift our weight over onto the leg, the heel comes down, and we come forwards, right? So working on a leg extension exercise is still working on the neural pathways for walking. It's just breaking it down. So you've got to look from a strength and conditioning perspective, the movements that they're not doing, connect them through, and then build it up. So we'll isolate, and then we'll do compound. So we'll isolate 4 movements that they can't do that are synonymous with walking, and they're the parts that they can't do with their walking. That's creating a neural pathway. And then we put it all together, and we'll join 2 of those pieces together, and then another 2 pieces together. Then we'll join those 2 pieces together to get those 4 pieces becoming one, which then creates that movement. And you link it into standing, balancing, and walking. Yeah. So when you sit there and you say it's like a leg extension, and they're like, oh, right, so kick my leg up like a leg extension. And they're like, okay, because they've done it 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 times and made that connection. They're like, oh, and then the body starts to understand how to make. So what is strengthening? Is that different from neuro? No, it's the same sort of stuff, because your brain controls the muscle, which controls the body to make the movement. We're just breaking it down into intricate little parts and then building it back up together again. So it's a simple process. It's not rocket science. It's the same as what everybody else is doing, except the difference is maybe how we approach it. And, strengthening is important, as long as we also have flexibility, mobility, as well as strengthening, and as well as the understanding of how to use it. We can't just go in there and get a kid to deadlift and say that's going to help their walking. The processes towards that is also important also, and not being too big. It's a balance. We do a lot of massage therapy. We do a lot of cupping. We do dry needling. We do muscle energy techniques. We do SDR, soft tissue releases. And we teach our parents how to do stretching without doing stretching. We do it a different way that hurts less, but creates a longer lasting result. And there's all these little things that's the difference. And it's that building it all into that package that's important. And, if we're all doing that sort of stuff with the kids, then we do see an improvement. But that in its own right is also strengthening, because we're strengthening their movement by lengthening a muscle that allows another muscle to engage, to allow for that strengthening to happen. But we don't think about it like that. You just have to think differently sometimes and look at the individual problem. and break it down and come up with a
Totally,
plan, right?
totally.
That's the goal. But that's what we should be doing anyway, right? Even if
I
it
was
was
just about to say,
a
yeah, I was going to say,
neurotypical athlete
if
that we're working with, we should still be looking at
you
that.
see all the athletes, they're having massage, they're having cupping, whatever they need for their bodies to be able to do that sport, they're having that. And I always explain to the parents, this is no different to you or I going to the gym. You wouldn't just go to the gym, do like weights, and then go home, and then go to the gym the next day, do the same weights, and then go home. Like, if you keep doing that, you're going to not be able to do that for much longer, because you're going to need some massage, you're going to need some stretching, you're going to need some whatever it might be for your body. And so I've had to explain it to them in that way sometimes, again, simpling it down for them to see that just because they're a child and they have cerebral palsy doesn't mean that they're not working the same as anybody else who will be going to the gym. They're just doing it specifically for what they need and what they're trying to improve on, whether it be standing, sitting, walking, etc.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about SDR, because obviously you have a lot of experience.
But there's also something we have to remember as well. There's also something on that though. You're good. There is a point on that though, right? And that is that, remember that if you're with a personal trainer or a sports coach as an athlete or as a general populace and you're not getting results, you're going to ditch your personal trainer, right? So we have to remember that the kids are the same. The kids need to see a result. The kids need to go forwards. The kids need to see a reason behind what they're doing. And if they're not, they're going to feel the same as us that are watching our diet, training hard, seeing a result or not seeing a result. We're going to be unhappy. We're going to be happy. And if we're not, then what's the point in doing it? And you start to lose your focus and you start to lose your want. And that, unfortunately, is where the kids also come in, because the kids, we just expect them to do therapy and just keep going and just keep going and just keep going and not seeing a result. But they get a bit bored and jaded. You've only got so long for the kids to get the results before they get annoyed. So it is important as a trainer to make sure that we're pushing the kids to achieve the results so they don't get just bored and jaded of doing therapy for no reason.
I totally agree.
And you're right. We would all go to a gym and we would all expect to see a result. It's important for them to see a result also. And that's sometimes why we push harder than we should do, and I'll admit that, to show them that they can take a couple of independent steps. And then we scale it back. And we say, okay, so we know you can do it. Let's now work out how we can turn it into functional. So they learn. And
reminding them of that.
But anyway, so
I think they're reminding them of that, celebrating when they are doing those things, like,
100%.
Totally agree. If they don't see anything, they don't see the improvement, they don't feel any different, and they're not. And sometimes, when you're scaling it back, you need to remind them. Remember, you took those 3 steps. Like, you can do this. We're scaling this back because we want to improve and go 4 steps, 5 steps, 6 steps. We can't do that until we're doing this. And I think with the kids, like you need to explain it to them, just as like as a sports personal trainer would need to explain it to us, like, don't go and lift the 50 kilos, you need to do this and this first, or whatever it may be. Like, I totally agree on that. So let's talk a little bit then about SDR, because obviously you have a lot of experience. Right? What was your first kind of, I suppose, experience in SDR and getting into that kind of side of therapy for kids pre and post?
Sure. So my first experience was baptism of fire, really. It was a child that had SDR, and I'd never worked with a disability bar from athletic performance, but even then I hadn't worked with many disabilities. So I'd done a little bit of RDA, because we had some kids that would come in that we'd do some RDA type work with, and a few kids in martial arts that had disabilities that I worked with, but I'd not really worked a huge amount with disabilities, which is why I was quite nervous about doing this job at the offset, because it wasn't my sort of forte or something that I knew a huge amount about. And then I was asked to work with this kid that had CP and had this operation, and then, when it's explained to you, it's quite severe. because your brain doesn't understand what it all means. We're going to go into their back and we're going to cut the nerve roots. I'm like, you're going to do what? It didn't make any sense to me. And then, as you progress, you understand that the selective part turns out is the really important part. And it's not just all of them that you're cutting. And once you start to understand it and it's explained to you, and luckily I had kind of the St. Louis team there to kind of guide me on that and explained it all. And then I did research and I read lots of papers. And then I looked at from like the initial SDR where they went basically right from the middle of their back all the way down to the lower back and cut everything out, and to what TS Park does now, where it's just into the L2, L3 area. And my baptism of that was to kind of learn the disabilities, learn the SDR, learn everything in one go, and just ask a million questions to Deanna and the St. Louis team, and kind of just compile how everything needs to be done. But I'd never really I didn't really understand spasticity either. So it was a real big learning curve for me the first year. All I knew is that I could teach movement, build up strength, build up movement, and then the rest of it I just had to learn. And it wasn't actually that scary. Once you understood it and you saw a knee going into valgus or varus or a hip rotating or the foot going into inversion or eversion, we correct it. But we would do that with an athlete anyway, so that's no different. So we would massage an area, we would use kinesi tape on it, we would look at why it wasn't happening. Glute med's not strong, not rotating out, VMO's not strong, no knee stability, the perineals aren't controlling very well and helping the foot to turn. And then you go, well, okay, so there's no gastric movement, there's no core strength. So just look at it from a basis of where they're weak and figure out where I need to make them strong, figure out what's not engaging, figure out how to make it engage, and really just go from that. And then it kind of went a bit more technical and kind of working it out from there and figuring out what I needed to do and how I could do it. I found it quite fascinating. A little bit scary, but massively fascinating at the same time. You probably got that anyway. It was fine. It was just a case of trying to work out what the weaknesses were, what the strengths were, what their abilities were. And it was the same as working with an athlete. It was figuring out what their biomechanical issues were, what their strength issues were, working out their basic strength profiles, and then just maximizing and getting balance. And that was key, was the balance. And then it got a little bit more technical than that, and then there became a process that I would like to follow, and then there was a reasoning behind why we follow the process. So it was just taking all the knowledge from the years of doing. I think I've run like 11 or 12,000 courses now. So there's quite a few
crazy,
intensives
isn't
that I've run. I know. It's nuts. They're mixtures of 1 weeks and 2 weeks, and most of them are 1 week or 2 weeks. That's a lot of time, and then there's 3 days, and then there's some onlines. But I think I worked it out the other day. It was like 11,000 or something courses in the 13 years or whatever it is that I've been doing it. And I think I've worked with about 2,000 kids or something stupid like that. It's huge numbers, and you got to look every time you're working on a child like nothing, and look at them like they're a blank bit of canvas. And I know that sounds really rude, a blank bit of canvas, but you really need to look at them as the person in front of you, not the condition that you're seeing. The condition is not something that I actually take into consideration. I ask all the questions before we start. On a Monday morning when a client comes in, I don't touch or work with anyone for probably the first 40 minutes. We sit everybody down and we have a conversation. Where are you? What have you done? Tell me your story. Let everybody just talk and speak. So then it takes the kind of issues out of the room, and it lets the child sort of hear my voice. It lets me watch the child with the parents and the parents' interaction with the child, work out what the child's like, whether they're a more controlling nature, where if we're having a conversation as a parent with myself, as the kids constantly trying to go in front of the parent and constantly get attention back onto them. And that tells me something as a coach of how I'm going to approach them. It also gives the parents time to tell me their story now, as opposed to tell me halfway through the sessions, which will take the time away from me working. Gives me an idea of what's happening. It allows me as a trainer to figure out where they had SDR, what other operations that they've had, because you forget to write it all down. If they've got challenges with epilepsy, whether they've got challenges with other medications that parents have forgotten to put on forms. And it just gives me the time then to kind of figure out the parents, the children, the person in front of us, and also, and it's a really big question, what do you want to achieve today? Or what do you want to achieve in the course? And, you know, most people come to me because they want me to teach their kid to walk. That tends to be the reason that I get a lot of people. They've tried everything, or they've been here, they've been there, they've tried everything like that. And some people want to come because they know I'm a tough instructor. Other people don't want to come because they know I'm a tough instructor. And other people have come because they've been everywhere else and the soft hasn't worked and they realize they're not achieving results. So they come and they realize I'm actually not that horrible and I'm not that tough an instructor. I just have an expectation. And that's the difference, is I have an expectation. So the parent should have an expectation. So if the parent comes into me and they say, we don't really know what we want to achieve, we just don't think they're doing their ability, or they think they could do more, then I ask them, it just opens up more conversation. And it means that the child's heard me talking and they've relaxed, the parents relaxed, everyone's relaxed, and then we start work and the child's already calm. And you're getting a really good idea of what that personality type is of the individual that you're working with. So really, I'm also assessing the person, how they walk into the clinic, how they come into the clinic. Have they got sticks? Are they using them? Are they in a wheelchair? Can they walk? Are they walking in sticks? Are they being pushed around in a wheelchair even though that they can walk independently? If so, why? What's happened? And just asking questions, because that tells me the mental state of the person. And I think what happens with SDR is that the parents that have had SDR, and if you disagree, that's all good, but I find that the parents that have had SDR tend to be a little bit more pushy and wanting a little bit more and pushing a little bit harder on their kid, because now the expectation is that their child should be able to do more, and they feel like their kids should be able to do more, or that they can do more. So they want more, they expect more, and you know, everybody is, and it's like it's up the game just a little bit, and it's kind of nice. It's kind of a good thing. That's my look on it. That doesn't mean that it has to be the same for everybody, but you know, it's just how I feel.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I've had like one or two that haven't been, but it's been majority and more push and want, and even like on the lead up to knowing that they want their child to have SDR, they show that in that kind of, that's when it starts, I suppose, for me. When I've say if I've been working with a child and I had a few in the past few years that then their parents found out about SDR, they feel that they really want their child to have it, and then they've been even more like pushy and really like wanting to work and improve and help their child and learn what they need to do, etc. If you want to hear more from Mike, you're going to have to tune in to our next episode. So this is To Be Continued. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks for tuning in to the Disable the Label podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a comment to let us know what you thought of this episode. More episodes will be coming soon, so make sure you tune in. Don't forget you can download our app for free via the App Store. That's Google Play or Apple App Store. Just search Disable the Label and you'll find us.